Welcome to the Dr. Cindy Show. I am your host, Dr. Cindy M. George. Today on the Dr. Cindy Show, we will be discussing child abuse. And my guest for today will be sharing his lived experiences of having been abused as a child and how he was able to overcome those experiences and be very successful as an adult. My guest for today will be Mr. Keyon Dooling, former NBA player of the Miami Heat and author of the book, What's Driving You. We will take a brief commercial break and we will be right back with my guest, Mr. Dooling. Welcome back to the Dr. Cindy Show. I am your host, Dr. Cindy M. George, and today my guest for today is Mr. Keyon Dooling. Welcome, Mr. Dooling, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dr. Cindy.
Mr. Dooling, today we'll be talking about child sexual abuse, and I know this is something that is, very near and dear to you. Do you want to share with us a little bit about how you feel and why you feel speaking about child abuse is so important right now?
Well, I think it's, if not now, then when? If not us, then who?
Yeah.
I think that it happens so much in families, in different communities, in different races, in different religions, in different cultures, that it's almost epidemic status. And the effects that it's having on the livelihoods of individuals is tragic, and so if we speak about it, we get to share the techniques of healing, and that's pretty much why I speak about it, to raise awareness and to bring some healing into the world.
Yes, and I love what you said in terms of just bringing awareness to it. A lot of times something is intimate and something as personal as sexual abuse or any form of abuse, whether it be emotional or physical, is something that is not really talked about. And I like what you said when you said we want to have to bring awareness to it, because before we can even begin to heal, we need to bring it to the forefront, and we need to begin to acknowledge and just be honest about what's really happening. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. For me, I think it's very difficult for a man to, honestly talk about it, especially if it happens from another man. What we usually do is overcompensate, whether it's anger, whether it's sexual dysfunction, whether it's, masking our pain, drinking, drugging, etc. So, I really, speak to that struggle as well, because I know how it is, for a young Black African-American man to be vulnerable enough to say what happened to them.
Yes.
But we're killing our families, we're killing ourselves with our behaviors and our coping mechanisms. Those haven't worked for us. And so what we have to do is we have to take it to the next level of healing. And a lot of times we don't know that healing is out there because the successful people don't necessarily talk about the process and the toughness of that process, and kind of give a blueprint to how to get through that tough process of doing your work.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that make it such taboo, as you said, Mr. Dooling, is the fact that if it is a male that is the victim, it somewhat tends to make them feel less of a man, less of a person.
Yeah.
And especially if the perpetrator was another male as well. And I think it's so significant for our viewers that are watching to really understand that you should not feel less of a person. It's not anything that you did wrong. It's not anything that you set yourself up to do. And it's something that that other person made that conscious decision to harm you. And I like what you said in terms of that sense of beginning to heal yourself, whether it be through therapy or whether it be just through that sense of acknowledgement. And one of the things that I think is important, and you said coping. Coping is something that that person would have to do, and it can either be a negative coping or a positive coping. Just like you said, some people might drink, some people might do drugs, some people might turn to other forms of illicit behaviors, sexual behaviors, and to try to just deal with that. On a more personal note for you, Mr. Dooling, how were you able to cope, not only as a child, but also into your adulthood as well, having experienced sexual abuse as a child?
So I went through a lot of different phases. I think the initial phase was anger. Anger was the first emotion that I resonated with from my trauma.
Okay.
I became very angry at about 7, 8 years old when this action happened to me. But I didn't dwell in anger. I had outlets and I had releases: basketball, football, Boys and Girls Club, programs like that were, group oriented, that educated us on sex and drugs, etc. That was another healing mechanism. I used my imaginations a lot of times. I would disconnect from reality, and not in a sense where I was delusional, but where I was visualizing my future, and where I would dream big and not put limits on what I could become. And, and from that big dream, then I would be able to set short-term goals to be able to achieve that dream. So basketball was something that was awesome for me. So I believe you have to have an outlet. My imagination was something that was awesome for me because it gave me that provision to make my vision come to pass. I think you have to have support. Even though my family wasn't aware of what I was going through, they were still supportive, and I felt loved. But I'll take it a step further. Those were, even though I feel like I did enough to get through, if I would have gotten simple therapy, or if I would have had, an honest conversation with my family about what happened, I could have saved myself a lot of damage. And that's why I share my story, because I know how young men disconnect from the realities that they go through. And those behaviors are damaging, and they're dooming our families, they're dooming our communities. And if we don't talk and speak directly to why we are acting this way, these cycles will continue. So I have to speak to the hurt, the healing part, so that we can get to the blessings that wait on us.
Absolutely. And as you're talking, I'm just nodding because you're absolutely right. For any healing to begin, for any change to begin, we have to go through that hurt process. And you said you first felt anger, then that turned into a lot of other feelings, a lot of emotional feelings of sadness and so forth. But you had that outlet. You were able to have your basketball, your football, and other athletic sports. And just the support of your family and knowing that you were loved was very helpful. But I think the key thing that you said for persons that may be going through it, not ready to talk to family and friends, just be true to themselves and allow themselves to feel, because once that's bottled up and once that stays in, that's when a lot of the damage comes, and having certain outlets, whether it be through music, whether it be through sports, whether it be through writing. You said you even use your video games. Yes, absolutely, And so until that person may be ready to share it, those are some of the things that they can do. What would you say, Mr. Dooling, in terms of a person right now that, an older person that might be watching, and might be feeling, this is something that happened to me when I was younger? What would you say to that person in helping that person to begin the healing process, assuming they haven't already?
Oh yeah, and it's the older you get, the more difficult it becomes, because you can really get stuck in your old ways, and you don't even realize you're living from this perspective. You just you put up these unconscious barriers that you don't even know are there. I would say that the first thing is that healing is possible. It's never too late. And it could happen for you. Each individual person can find their own healing. I think the first thing that I had to do was I had to connect with God. I couldn't do it alone. I think it's a spiritual side of humanity that we're forgetting about. And I think a lot of times society, kind of shuns the spiritual side. But I believe that you have to seek healing, and sometimes you can't do it alone. So you have to connect to a source. And for me, that's Jesus Christ. Yeah. Therapy. Therapy changed my life. Yes. It was the gateway for me healing. I no longer could just resonate with anger and pleasure. Yeah. I learned how to deal with all the emotions in between there. And I allow myself to feel those emotions. And when you can identify how you're feeling and interpret which emotion that is, it's so empowering if something is bothering you. Yes. Also, the last thing I would say is if you haven't dealt with the issues, there's some unresolved things in you, and you could be triggered at any time. Absolutely. If you were abused mentally, physically, spiritually, sexually, emotionally, you are a candidate for anxiety, depression, sexual dysfunction, and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which I dealt with. And you don't want to have to go through one of these things in order to seek your healing, when you can do it on the front end and avoid these things and manage these things. Yeah. And so that's what I say.
Yes, and thank you so much for your candor. I mean, it is so important to what you're saying in terms of self-awareness is really what I'm hearing. And in order for, again, that healing process to begin, the individual, it is essential for the individual to then go back and say, who am I? What am I feeling? Why am I hurting? Where are these feelings coming from? And just be true to that. And then allow themselves to go through that process of those negative emotions to subside and to be gotten rid of. So that is so significant what you're saying, and so essential to the healing process. You mentioned a lot of...
I'm sorry, can I add one more point to that?
Definitely. Yes.
There's also a forgiveness component in there that has to take heed for healing to set in. Okay. A lot of times, in particular with sexual abuse, people associate healing with justice. Okay. Well, if they don't go to jail, or if they don't have to pay for the crime, or if the statute of limitation is too late, I can't do anything, they kind of give in to that justice won't be provided. Right. And what I'm saying is that healing needs to sit in. Sometimes, you'll have an opportunity for justice. If we get the word out there enough, the next generation will be able to get justice. Yeah. But a lot of us won't get justice, but we can still get healing. And that's what we should seek first. We should definitely seek that healing component. Don't forget about that forgiveness part, because if we don't forgive, you totally, still give a piece of that power to that person who victimized you or left you be or whatever might have happened. So that forgiveness component is very important. Yeah.
And thank you for adding that. And as I hear you speak, it sounds to me as if you were able, in your process of healing, to forgive the perpetrator who molested you when you were a child. And just, very briefly, how was that able to allow you to not only heal, but then to move forward and do all the wonderful things that you're doing now in your life?
Yeah, well, it took a major breakdown for me to really do that, get to that point, and really doing my work. I didn't get to that point for 32 years in my life, and then I hit rock bottom, suffering from PTSD, and it forced me to, evaluate and kind of go back and reflect. But for me, I have forgiven, the perpetrators, and the thing about it is, in order to move forward, I had to, release that. Now, it took a long time to get to that point. It's not like I can, forget what happened to me and I want to dwell in their presence, because I don't. I never want to see that person again. And I hope I never do see that person again. And I do my work so that, if I ever have that kind of encounter, I won't let my emotions get the best of me. But you'll still always, the person who hurt you, there'll always be that imprint. But what I'm saying is that, even if you have that imprint, you can forgive that person. You just don't forget it, and you hold them accountable. Right. You know what I mean? The accountability part is where, the healing process can come, whether it's that saying your piece to that person or getting justice. Right. Because a lot of times it happens within families, and you have to see some of these people who do these acts against, some of our children. Yeah.
And as I hear you talk, I'm hearing there are two components to it, giving forgiveness and also giving forgiveness to the perpetrator, but also still holding the perpetrator accountable. Because a lot of times, sometimes the victim may blame themselves, especially if it's somebody that they may have known as a child, somebody they may have trusted. And just depending on how the situation came about, the victim may still have a lot of guilt about that. But I think it's important what you said in terms of allowing yourself as the victim to recognize that that perpetrator needs to be held accountable. And then you let that go as that burden that you may be holding on yourself. And then in addition to that, forgive and release all of the anger and a lot of that hostility for that individual. Those are two main steps toward healing. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And also that support system. You know, what happens a lot of times, and why I think that we have not really had success with, you know, sexual abuse in particular is because when people tell, when sometimes when, you know, the victim comes forward and say, hey, such and such touched me.
Yes.
Such and such, you know, said some inappropriate things to me. Such and such, you know what I mean, showed himself, you know, inappropriately within the family. A lot of times we're called, you know, those kids are called liars, delusional, and discouraged from, you know, talking about their experience because a lot of the older generation had suffered that kind of abuse, you know, whether it was from, you know, society in the way that, you know, some injustices were against them and you couldn't report it, or, you know, the hurt of the black man, you know, coming home, you know, plundering the wife, you know, beating her and, you know, doing things to her. Right. So I think we've been sometimes programmed to look the other way and shut up. It never happened. And what happens in the family stays in the family. Right. And it's created a lot of, I mean, it's created a lot of separation within the family, you know, because once that child becomes an adult and understand what he or she went through, they usually separate. And it kind of, you know, can destroy the family structure. When we can talk about these things, we know sometimes we have people in our families who might not be right. Some people in our networks who might not be right. And we too often we sit in silence. And, you know, I want to convict the people who sit by in silence and allow these things to happen when they know they can change that. Don't let a child suffer for something that you can step up and change. Right.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good place for us to take a break. Mr. Dooling, we'll take a brief commercial break. And when we come back, I want us to talk some more about sharing your experience and some more things that you would say to families, to those individuals. And then I want to talk a little bit about your book as well, What's Driving You.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds good?
Sounds good.
We're going to go ahead and take a brief commercial break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Dr. Cindy Show. I am your host, Dr. Cindy M. George, and on today's show, I have for my guest, Mr. Keyon Dooling, and we've been having a really riveting and very candid discussion about his lived experience of having been sexually abused as a child. And before the break, we were talking about just really the importance of having that family support and the importance of being mindful and recognizing the truth when it's out there. If children come and they say these are some of the things that might be happening, you know, as adults, as family members, we want to really take mind of that and really not shove it under the carpet, because in times after that child is not believed and just pushed aside, a lot of negative things can happen, not only to the child, but to the family structure as well. So definitely we want to promote that if children are indicating negative things about someone, having touched them and so forth, we really want to go ahead and really investigate that. Mr. Dooling, thank you so much again for joining us. Do you have any closing thoughts as we begin to close our show today? I know we've shared quite a bit, and any closing thoughts for children that may be going through this? What would you say to them? And then secondly, again, the closing thoughts to an adult and then to family members.
Okay. So first to the children, I would have to say is, what's up? I love you. I think you are the future of the world and you can be great. But if you have been going through anything, any struggles, if your father isn't home, if you have been abused physically, mentally, sexually, emotionally, I would say that God will sometimes give you double for your trouble. That imagination that you have, use that power of visualization and dream about becoming a doctor, a lawyer, a Dr. Cindy, a Keyon Dooling, a pastor, something positive, and I believe if you can close your eyes and visualize it, you can open your eyes and realize it, work towards those goals every day. So don't never underestimate the power of visualization. Second, to the adults who may be afraid of healing, I would say I've been there with you. I understand how we can get comfortable in our junk, but I will say that there's a quality of life that you deserve. You deserve to be free from the past. You deserve to be healed from the hurt. You deserve to receive the man or woman that God has for you. But with all that baggage, you might be blocking it up. So go dump that baggage off. Go see your therapist. Drop some of that baggage off. Take some of the tools with you that can help you manage your emotions and seek that healing. To the families, come together. Come back to God. Come back to our traditions, the cookouts, the education, the art, the dance, the craft, the community, the togetherness, the spending our money, making sure it recycles in our community a few times so we can build that up. So our kids don't have to walk around in poverty. So our kids don't have to walk around in the ghetto. So we can turn our ghetto into the suburbs. We have that power, but we can't get there without healing. So families, come back together, pray together, eat together, encourage each other, read together, have cookouts, all the things we used to do back in the days. Let's get back to it. We can do it. We are important. We matter. And we are spectacular. Our arts, our culture, our faith in God is to be celebrated. So the good people stand up. Stop letting the bad people dominate the headlines, set the trends of our culture. And let's step up and let's come back to who we are and let's glorify God and let's live a happy, prosperous life.
Yes.
That's what I would say to the families.
Oh, wonderful, Mr. Dooling. I mean, that is such an inspiration, such an inspiration. I'm sure anyone that's watching, whether it was a child that is experiencing any form of abuse, whether sexual, emotional, or physical, to the adult who has and is trying to heal, and to the family of those victims. I think that was just so powerful, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
In closing, again, I just want to say thank you so much to my guest for today, Mr. Dooling. And before we close, I just wanted to take a few minutes to have Mr. Dooling share about his book. Just tell us a little bit about it and where we can find it if we want to get it.
Yep, my book is called What's Driving You. Subtitle is How I Overcame Abuse and Became a Leader in the NBA. I put artwork with the book because some people heal visually. I put a soundtrack with the book because some people heal through their ear gate. I wrote an incredible story. I relived a lot of my triumphs, and I also, relived a lot of my tragic moments. Mm-hmm. And I put it in a way that is encouraging, inspiring, and motivating. You can get that book on what'sdrivingyou.net, which is my website. You can get that book on iTunes, under Keyon Dooling and What's Driving You. You can get that book any way you want to. Look it up. It's on Amazon. The book is unbelievable. It's underrated. I wrote it for people who need healing. I put a lot of tools in there, and I was very honest and transparent. Don't go through a breakdown. Don't go to a mental institution before you do your work. Get out in front of it. Seek that healing. Put it at the top of your list, and you can find it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to also add that I have read the book myself, and it is an awesome read. I do encourage anyone that wants to learn more about it, that's going through the healing process, to definitely take a read, and it will definitely be an inspirational help for you. Thank you again for joining us today, Mr. Dooling. And I just want to say thank you to the viewers for watching this episode of the Dr. Cindy Show. And just two closing thoughts for anyone, again, that might be watching. That the important thing is to begin to acknowledge, begin to be honest and truthful about what has happened and what is happening, and to begin to seek help, whether it be through therapy with someone like myself, or if you just want to begin talking to someone that you trust and beginning to share, because we want to get those emotions out. We don't want them to get bottled up, because if we don't find an outlet, whether it be through sports, through anything creative, it will definitely become damaging. We can get breakdowns. We can become danger to other people. And so we want to just remember that. And also to the final closing thought is that you can get through it. You can get through it. It might seem surmountable right now, but there is a healing at the end. There is light at the tunnel. And I just want to thank Mr. Dooling again for coming on and showing us an example of someone who was able to get through that. And for you as the viewer, anyone out there, to know that it is possible. Until next time, I am your host, Dr. Cindy M. George. Thank you for watching.